They started with just one, but every night there were more, and I had no idea where they came from or what was following them into my home. It all started with a gold coin. Imagine coming home to find a single gold coin lying on your doorstep. At first, it seems like a simple mistake, or maybe just something your cat picked up, but when it happens again and again, you start to wonder, where are they coming from? What's going on? That's exactly what happened to one family, and the truth they uncovered was far more bizarre than they ever expected. Before I reveal what happened next, let me ask you one thing. If you believe that no one, human or animal, should have to face danger alone, and pets but unsung heroes, then please tap that subscribe button. Most people scroll past stories like this, but your one click could help this story reach someone who needs to hear it. It all began on an ordinary evening, the kind where the world outside seemed peaceful, and inside, everything felt like it had a perfect rhythm. Emma and Tom had just finished their evening routines. The dishes were done, the kids were in bed, and the house was quiet, save for the occasional sound of the wind outside. It was a rare moment of stillness in their usually busy lives. They settled into the couch with cups of tea in hand, enjoying the rare chance to unwind together after a long day. Max, their curious tabby cat, was nestled by the window, watching the world outside with keen eyes. He had always been an independent spirit. He didn't need constant attention and had his own little world to explore. Max wasn't like other cats who sought constant affection. Instead, he had a natural curiosity that often led him to mysterious places. He was a bit of a wanderer, often disappearing for hours, only to return with his usual nonchalant attitude. But tonight, there was something different in the air. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over their suburban street, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. She couldn't explain it, but it was like an inexplicable tension hung in the air, wrapping around the house. Tom and Emma exchanged a few words, but their voices seemed to carry a certain weight, as if their usual flow of conversation had been interrupted by something unspoken. It was a simple evening, but something, somewhere, felt just off. Emma glanced out the window, watching Max as he sauntered off toward the front door, then turned to Tom. "Have you seen Max lately?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "He's been acting a little strange, don't you think?" Tom didn't respond immediately. He didn't think much of it. Cats were known for their quirky behaviors. Max had always been independent, and there was no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Emma was right. Max had been coming and going more often than usual, like he was on some kind of secret mission, though they couldn't quite figure out what that mission was. "I guess he's just doing his usual thing," Tom said, shrugging off her comment. But as he looked back out the window, he couldn't help but wonder. That was when Emma stood up. "I'll let Max in," she said, walking toward the door. The sound of her footsteps seemed unusually loud in the quiet house, echoing in the hallway like the prelude to something bigger. As she opened the front door, Emma froze for a moment. The night air felt colder than it had just a few minutes ago, and the light from the porch lamp seemed to cast an eerie glow over the yard. She looked down at the ground, expecting to see Max waiting patiently for her to open the door. But what she saw instead made her heart skip a beat. There, lying on the porch in the soft light, was a small, shiny object. At first, Emma thought it was just a stray piece of jewelry or a trinket someone had dropped. She leaned down to pick it up, her mind already preparing the usual explanation. Maybe it had fallen from someone's pocket, or maybe it had been left behind by a careless neighbor. But as her fingers closed around the object, a chill ran through her. This was no ordinary piece of jewelry. It wasn't a piece of discarded plastic or metal. It was a gold coin, a real gold coin, gleaming and shiny under the porch light. Her breath caught in her throat. It was old, worn around the edges, but undeniably gold. The coin seemed to shimmer in a way that was almost unnatural. She stared at it, perplexed. "Tom," she called out, her voice slightly shaky. "Come look at this." Tom stood up immediately, his curiosity piqued. He took a few steps over to Emma, who was still holding the coin in her hand. He looked at her, then at the coin, his brow furrowing. "Where did this come from?" he asked, his voice quiet, a hint of disbelief in his tone. "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But look at it. It's real gold. It doesn't look like something anyone would just leave lying around." Tom took the coin from her, inspecting it closely. It was definitely gold. There was no mistaking that. It wasn't a cheap imitation. The gleam of the metal reflected in the light, casting a faint glow on the porch. "Did Max bring this in?" Emma asked, her voice still uncertain. Tom shook his head. "Max is a cat. He doesn't exactly have a knack for treasure hunting." Emma laughed nervously. but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. She glanced down at Max, who had appeared at the door, casually rubbing against the threshold, looking like he had no idea there was anything out of the ordinary. "Maybe it's a coincidence," she said, trying to brush it off. "Maybe Max found it somewhere, like in the yard or around the neighborhood." Tom didn't say anything, but he could see the doubt in Emma's eyes. They both knew that what they were holding wasn't just any coin. The weight of it, the strange glow, it all felt wrong, but they didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. Still, as they both stood there in the doorway, looking at the gold coin, a strange sense of unease settled over them. The wind picked up again, sending a chill through the air. Max seemed to notice, too, his fur bristling for a moment before he sat down calmly at their feet. "Let's not overthink it," Tom finally said, trying to break the silence. "It's just a coin. Maybe it's from one of the neighbors. Let's go inside." But as Emma closed the door behind them, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. They went about the rest of the evening as they normally would, but the coin, still sitting on the kitchen counter, remained a silent presence between them. That night, they went to bed like usual, but sleep didn't come easy for Emma. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind kept returning to that coin, the way it had gleamed in the light, the strange feeling that had crept over her when she'd picked it up. It wasn't just a coin, it was a message. But what was the message? And who had left it there for them? The next night, Emma was determined to put the whole thing out of her mind. She had convinced herself that the coin was nothing more than a random object that had somehow made its way into their yard. Maybe it had been left there by someone passing by, or maybe Max had found it on his nightly rounds. But when she opened the door again, she found herself staring at the porch with a mixture of dread and curiosity. There, once again, was another gold coin. This time, it was placed even closer to the door, as though it had been waiting for her to find it. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She reached down, her hands trembling slightly, and picked up the coin. This one was different from the first, slightly larger, with intricate designs on the edges. There was no mistaking it. It was real, and it was gold. She turned to Tom, who had just entered the living room. "Tom, look," she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "It's happening again." He walked over, his face pale as he examined the coin. "This isn't a coincidence anymore," he murmured. Max, who had appeared by the door once again, sat quietly, staring at them with his usual expression, calm, indifferent, as though nothing out of the ordinary was happening. It was as if the cat was entirely unaware of the strange occurrence. Or was he? The days following the second gold coin felt like an unsettling blur. At first, Emma tried to tell herself it was just a strange coincidence. Maybe Max had stumbled upon a small hoard of old coins somewhere. Perhaps there was a hidden treasure in the yard, or one of the neighbors had a collection they didn't mind leaving behind. But as the days turned into nights, Emma's unease only grew. Something was off. Each night, another coin appeared. It wasn't just the coins themselves that disturbed her. It was the feeling that followed them. A heavy silence would fall over the house the moment she picked up each new coin, as though the house itself held its breath in anticipation. As she held each piece of gold, a sense of dread would wash over her, but she could never quite explain why. It was as if the coins were a link to something far darker than a simple mistake or a harmless prank. After the third coin, Emma couldn't ignore the growing sensation that they were being watched. Every time Max would go outside, she would find herself staring at the window, anxiously waiting to see if he would return with another one. It was no longer curiosity that drove her to open the door each night. It was fear. She needed to know what was going on. What was Max bringing home, and who or what was leaving them for him? Tom, too, began to feel it. His once casual attitude toward the coins turned into quiet suspicion. He no longer dismissed it as a coincidence. He tried to remain calm, but even he couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was at work. He began to look over his shoulder, as if expecting something, or someone, to be lurking outside in the dark. By the fourth night, Emma had decided she could no longer simply let the situation unfold without looking deeper into it. She was tired of pretending that everything was fine. She needed answers, and she needed them now. When she opened the door that night, her breath caught in her throat. There, lying next to the porch, was not just a coin, but a small pouch. It was made of old, weathered leather, the kind that might be found in antique shops or at the bottom of forgotten chest drawers. She bent down to pick it up, her hands trembling. It was a strange contrast against the shiny, glimmering gold coins. This old, beaten pouch seemed out of place. As she opened the pouch, Emma's fingers brushed against the smooth edges of more coins. But this time there were more than one. She pulled them out, each one the same as the last. old, golden, and gleaming in the dim light of the porch. But something else fell out too, a small, folded piece of parchment. With shaking hands, she unfolded the paper. The writing was old, with faded ink, but she could still make out the words. To the one who finds this treasure, know that it is not merely gold that has been left behind. Beware of what follows, for the coins you find will lead to more than riches. Emma stood frozen on the porch, her mind racing. She didn't understand. What is this? She whispered to herself. Was this some kind of warning? A message? Or was someone playing a cruel trick on them? Max, as usual, sat by her feet, purring innocently as though there was no cause for concern. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the cat knew something she didn't, that he was somehow involved in this strange, dark mystery. How could a simple cat be at the center of something so bizarre? "Tom," she shouted, rushing inside with the pouch and the coins in hand. Tom looked up, startled, from where he had been sitting in the living room. "What is it?" "I don't know," Emma said, breathless. "But look at this." She placed the pouch and the coins on the table, then showed him the parchment. Tom took the note, reading it with furrowed brows. "This doesn't make any sense. This is some kind of joke, right? A prank?" "I don't think so," Emma replied. "I've never seen anything like this before. The coins, the note, the pouch. It doesn't feel right." Tom sat down, rubbing his face in frustration. "But why would anyone leave this for us? And why is it always Max bringing them in?" "That's what I don't understand," Emma said. "Why him?" After the fourth coin, Emma and Tom knew they couldn't ignore it any longer. They decided to take action. They needed to find out where the coins were coming from and, more importantly, who or what was leaving them. The first step was to track Max. They both agreed to stay up that night, to watch him closely. This time, instead of letting Max roam freely around the yard, they kept the back door cracked, just enough to watch without disturbing him. Hours passed. Max didn't seem to be in any hurry. He was his usual self, calm, silent, and as always, very independent. At one point, he wandered over to the tree line at the edge of the yard, sniffing around and scratching the base of an old oak tree. Emma and Tom exchanged glances, both of them wondering if this was where the gold coins were being hidden. But Max didn't seem to be digging or trying to unearth anything. He just sat there for what seemed like hours, staring into the darkness. "What is he doing out there?" Tom muttered, frustration growing in his voice. But as the clock ticked, Emma suddenly had a thought. What if it's not Max finding the coins? What if he's just being guided to them? Guided by what? Tom asked, shaking his head. Emma's heart began to pound. What if it's something else? Something following him? Something we can't see? Tom's face went pale. He hadn't considered that possibility. Was something lurking in the shadows, leading Max to the coins? He didn't want to entertain the idea, but after everything they'd seen, he couldn't help but wonder. The next morning, Emma and Tom decided to take action. They were no longer content with simply waiting. They had to know what was going on. They began asking around the neighborhood, trying to find any answers. No one had seen anything strange. No one knew anything about the gold coins, nor had they heard of any other mysterious occurrences. Everyone simply assumed it was some kind of joke or a bizarre coincidence. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than met the eye. She needed to find out more. So, she turned to the one person who might know, her grandmother. Her grandmother, Nora, was a historian, well-versed in local legends and old stories. She had lived in the area for years and was often the person to go to for historical questions. Emma called her up, desperate for answers. "Grandma, I need your help," Emma said, after explaining the strange occurrences. "I don't know who else to turn to. What do you know about any hidden treasures in this area?" Nora was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. "There are rumors," she said. "Old stories passed down from generations. Some say that many years ago, a man named Samuel Griffin buried a fortune in gold somewhere near here. He was a recluse, an eccentric old man who lived in the house at the edge of the woods. People said he hid his treasure, and that it would only be found by someone worthy." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Do you think it could be connected to Max? Could the coins be his treasure?" Nora didn't answer immediately. "I don't know, Emma, but I'll tell you this. If the coins are truly connected to Samuel Griffin, then there's more to this story than you can imagine. You need to be careful. There's a reason those coins have stayed hidden all these years." Emma's blood ran cold. What had they gotten themselves into? The phone call with Emma's grandmother lingered in her mind long after she hung up. The mention of Samuel Griffin, the eccentric recluse, who allegedly hid a fortune in the woods, only added layers of mystery to an already perplexing situation. What did her grandmother mean by "be careful"? And what was the connection between Max and this hidden treasure? The unease Emma felt earlier seemed to settle deeper into her bones, like an ominous fog slowly creeping through her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that the coins were leading her somewhere, towards something, and Max, her seemingly innocent cat, was playing a pivotal role. But the question was, what was it? That afternoon, Emma and Tom set out to investigate. They had to know more about Samuel Griffin, the man who, according to local legend, had buried his fortune in the woods near their home. The first stop was a local library, a place where Nora had spent countless hours researching old town records. Emma hoped she could find some clue, some old newspaper or journal entry that would shed light on the mysterious figure who seemed to haunt their lives now. The library was quiet, its shelves filled with history and old books that smelled of dust and age. As Emma and Tom walked through the aisles, searching for any mention of Samuel Griffin, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself was heavier here, thick with the weight of forgotten stories. They pored over old maps of the area, ancient town records, and faded photographs from the past. But it wasn't until they reached the very back of the library, where the oldest records were kept, that they found something that would change everything. In a weathered, leather-bound book titled The Lost History of Our Town, Emma found a reference to Samuel Griffin. The entry was short, almost cryptic, and it gave her chills. It read, "Samuel Griffin, a man of wealth and secrecy, came to our town many years ago. Known for his eccentricities, he was said to have a vast fortune hidden somewhere in the woods. Few people knew him, and those who did were afraid to speak of him. One night, Samuel disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only rumors of a treasure buried deep within the forest. Some say he made a pact with the land itself, binding his treasure to it. Others claim his spirit watches over it, waiting for the worthy to find it." Emma's heart raced as she read the words aloud to Tom. "What do you think this means? A pact with the land? His spirit watching over the treasure?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fascination. Tom took a step back, his mind clearly working through the implications. "It's like some kind of legend, but it sounds too strange to be true. Could there really be something buried out there?" Emma shook her head, trying to make sense of it. "But why is Max bringing home these coins? Why is this happening to us now?" Before Tom could respond, Emma's gaze landed on a peculiar map tucked between the pages of the book. It was a hand-drawn map of the town, with a section marked out in the woods where a large X was placed. The area corresponded to the same woods where Emma had seen Max wandering, the same woods that seemed to call to him every time he went outside. "Look at this," Emma said, pointing to the map. "This is where it says the treasure is hidden. It's right by that old oak tree, the one Max always goes to." Tom followed her finger, staring at the marked spot on the map. "This is getting weird, Emma. I don't like it. Maybe we should leave it alone." But Emma's determination was stronger than ever. There were too many coincidences, too many strange occurrences, for it all to be an accident. They had to know the truth. They had to find out what was really going on. That evening, under the cover of twilight, Emma and Tom set out for the woods. They packed a small flashlight and a few other essentials, unsure of what they might encounter. Max had already disappeared into the yard, and they followed him cautiously, not wanting to lose track of him. The trees loomed tall and dark as they entered the woods, the sound of crunching leaves underfoot, the only noise breaking the otherwise still silence. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. It felt oppressive, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Max led them toward the old oak tree they had seen on the map. As they approached it, Emma's unease grew. The tree stood like a sentinel in the dark, its massive branches reaching out like gnarled hands. The shadows beneath it were deep and impenetrable, and the closer they got, the more Emma felt the weight of the forest around her, closing in. "This is it," Emma whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Tom glanced around nervously. "I don't know about this, Emma. Something doesn't feel right." Max, however, seemed perfectly at ease. He sat at the base of the oak tree, looking up at them with his usual expression of indifference. It was as if he had been waiting for them to arrive. Without another word, Emma knelt down beside the tree and began to dig. Her hands shook with a mixture of fear and excitement as she moved the dirt aside, her mind racing with the possibilities. Was this the moment they had been waiting for? Were they about to uncover the hidden treasure of Samuel Griffin? Minutes passed, and just as Emma was beginning to doubt whether they were on the right track, her hand hit something hard. She gasped and quickly brushed away more dirt to reveal a small, rusted metal box. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it, pulling it out of the earth and placing it carefully on the ground. It was old, very old, but unmistakably a treasure chest. "Tom, look," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Tom crouched beside her, his face pale. "What is that?" "It's the treasure," Emma said, her voice barely audible. "It has to be." They stared at the box for a moment, unsure of what to do next. What if they opened it and unleashed something terrible? What if the legend was true, and there was a reason Samuel Griffin had hidden his fortune in such a secretive, guarded way? After a long pause, Emma reached forward and slowly opened the rusty lid. Inside, there was a small collection of gold coins, neatly stacked and gleaming in the dim light. But that wasn't all. Beneath the coins, there was something else, something that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. It was a letter, carefully folded and sealed with wax. She pulled it out, holding it in her hands like a fragile artifact. Her heart raced as she carefully broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were chilling. "To the one who finds this treasure, know that the land has chosen you. You are the keeper now, the one destined to protect what was left behind. But beware, the coins are only the beginning. What you have uncovered is only a part of what lies ahead. You are no longer just a bystander. You have entered a pact, and now the land will require its price." Emma's voice faltered as she read the letter aloud. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Tom was silent, his face pale and his eyes wide with shock. This is insane." Max, who had been sitting silently beside them, suddenly stood up and turned to leave. Emma and Tom exchanged a look, but before they could stop him, the cat darted off into the woods, vanishing into the darkness. "Max," Emma called out, but the cat was already gone. They sat there for a long moment, staring at the open box, the coins, and the letter in their hands. It was clear now. This wasn't just about treasure. It wasn't about gold or riches. Something much darker had been set into motion. The question was, what was it, and how were they connected to it? Max's disappearance only added to the mystery. They knew they had to follow him, to figure out what he was leading them toward. But Emma had a nagging feeling that this wasn't going to be a simple journey of discovery. Something darker, more sinister, was at play. The idea of a pact with the land, something she had dismissed as mere legend, was beginning to feel very real. The treasure was only the beginning, and Max, he wasn't just a cat. He was the key to something far larger than either Emma or Tom could have ever imagined. But what would it cost them to uncover the full truth? The eerie silence of the woods enveloped Emma and Tom as they stood by the old oak tree, staring at the metal box they had unearthed. The weight of the letter in Emma's hands felt heavier with each passing second, as though it held more than just words. It held a warning. The words, "the land will require its price," echoed in her mind, and she felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. Tom, ever the skeptic, was no longer dismissing it as a mere coincidence. There was something in the air, something unseen but tangible. As Max disappeared into the shadows of the woods, it felt as though they were being pulled deeper into a web of mystery that they hadn't yet fully understood. Emma's hand trembled as she clutched the letter. What kind of price was the land demanding? Was it connected to Max, the treasure, or something darker? They both remained silent for a long moment, their breaths caught in their throats, as if holding their words back would keep them safe from whatever lay ahead. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think the land has been waiting for someone to find this treasure?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of fear. Emma didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced at the small pile of gold coins still lying in the box. It had all seemed so simple before. The coins, the treasure, the quiet life they had led. But now, it felt like they were standing at the threshold of something ancient, something they were never meant to uncover. "I don't know, Tom, but whatever it is, it's tied to Max, and it's tied to us now too. We can't ignore it." She tucked the letter into her pocket and closed the box, the coins clinking softly as she did so. Her heart raced, and her mind raced with it. The ancient pact, the one that had kept the treasure hidden for so long, wasn't just a legend. It was real. The land had chosen them, and now they were bound to it in ways they couldn't yet understand. As they made their way back through the woods, the air around them seemed to grow colder. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying an almost unnatural chill. Emma felt a sharp tug at her chest, a growing sense of unease gnawing at her like an animal clawing at its prey. Max's sudden disappearance felt like more than just a stray cat wandering off. It was as if he had gone to fulfill his part of the pact, to play his role in this twisted game. "Do you think Max knows something we don't?" Emma asked, breaking the silence between them. "I don't know," Tom replied, his voice tight with anxiety. "But he's been acting different lately, more aware. It's like he knows what's coming. I think we're in way over our heads here." Emma nodded, her heart heavy with fear. The realization that Max wasn't just a cat, that he was a part of something far larger, left her feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. But who was pulling the strings? And why were they chosen? They returned home, each step heavier than the last. The house that had once been their sanctuary now felt like a prison, filled with shadows and secrets. They walked through the door, both of them silently aware that they could never go back to the way things were. They were no longer just an ordinary family with an ordinary cat. They had uncovered something dark and ancient, and it was following them. Max was nowhere to be found when they entered the house. His absence only deepened the dread that had taken root in Emma's heart. She knew that he had left to complete the next part of the pact. But where was he going? What had he become in this twisted story? The night stretched on as Emma and Tom sat in the living room, trying to make sense of everything. They had the gold coins, the letter, and the mysterious connection between Max and the hidden treasure. But there was one more thing they needed to understand: the spirit of Samuel Griffin. Emma couldn't shake the image of the reclusive man, his strange disappearance, and the pact he had made with the land. She recalled the chilling line from the letter: "You have entered a pact, and now the land will require its price." Tom, pacing the room, suddenly stopped. "You don't think the land wants something from us, do you? Something other than just the coins?" Emma's eyes widened as she considered the possibility. What if the price wasn't just the treasure? What if it was something darker? She stood up abruptly. "I need to find out more about Samuel Griffin. If he's connected to this curse, then maybe we can figure out how to break it." "I don't think there's a way to break it," Tom said softly. "Not now. We're too deep in." But Emma refused to accept that. She grabbed her coat and headed toward the door. "I'm going back to the library. There has to be something else in the records, something that can help us." As Emma walked through the library once more, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was following her. It wasn't just the ghostly legend of Samuel Griffin. It was the feeling that the land itself was watching, waiting for her to uncover more. She returned to the section of the library where she had found the book about Samuel Griffin. She began to search through more journals, flipping through the pages, hoping for a clue, anything that would explain the curse and how to break it. Hours passed, and Emma's frustration mounted. She found a few more mentions of Griffin, but nothing that shed light on how to stop the curse. The more she read, the more she realized that this wasn't a simple treasure hunt. This was about a man who had bargained with the land itself, who had hidden his wealth, not just for himself, but for some unknown purpose. Then, as the sun began to set outside the library's windows, Emma stumbled upon something she hadn't noticed before. A small, dusty ledger was hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers. The handwriting inside was frantic, almost manic. "The price of the land is always paid in blood. The treasure will bring ruin to those who seek it, and the one who uncovers it will be the one to sacrifice." Emma's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a warning, it was a prophecy. The curse wasn't something they could escape, it was something they had to endure. The price wasn't in gold, it was in life. Her thoughts raced. Was the spirit of Samuel Griffin still alive? Somehow in the land? Was his ghost still watching, waiting for someone to complete the pact? Emma's mind reeled with questions, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about Max. It was about them too. Emma rushed home, her thoughts jumbled, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to make of the ledger's words. She didn't know what kind of price the land wanted, but she knew one thing: they weren't the only ones who would pay. When she opened the door, she was greeted by an eerie silence. Max was sitting in the middle of the living room, staring at her with an unsettling calm. His fur was matted with dirt, his eyes unusually intense. Tom, who had been pacing anxiously, froze when he saw Max. Where has he been? What happened? Max didn't respond, of course, but his gaze felt too intelligent, too knowing. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the cat. The connection between Max and the land was undeniable. The treasure, the coins, the pact, it had all led to this moment. Max stood, his eyes locking with Emma's, and for a split second, she saw something ancient in them, a knowledge far older than anything she could comprehend. She reached out to him, her hands trembling. Before she could touch him, Max darted toward the door, as if beckoning her to follow. Without thinking, Emma ran after him, Tom trailing close behind. Max led them outside once again, toward the woods, toward the place where it all began. As they reached the familiar oak tree, Max turned and looked back at them one last time, before disappearing into the shadows of the forest. The land had called them here, and they had no choice but to follow. The night was alive with the whispers of something ancient, something older than the trees themselves. As Emma and Tom stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the impenetrable darkness, They knew there was no turning back. Max, their seemingly innocent cat, had become their guide, leading them deeper into a mystery they had never asked to be a part of. The treasure, the coins, and the spirit of Samuel Griffin had all been linked to them now. The curse was real, and the price that came with uncovering it wasn't something they could simply escape. What they had unearthed was more than just a collection of gold. It was a pact with the land itself, a pact that had been waiting centuries for someone to fulfill. As they followed Max into the woods, Emma's mind raced. Every step forward felt like a descent into a place of no return, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she knew that the answers they sought lay ahead. Not when she realized that the true price wasn't the treasure. It was the very life they had built. Max led them to the heart of the forest, where the air was thick and still, the silence almost unbearable. And there, beneath the massive oak tree, the very one where they had unearthed the treasure, Emma felt a strange pull. It was as if the earth itself was beckoning them to come closer. Without thinking, she knelt down and placed the gold coins from the box onto the ground, letting them spill out in a circle. The ancient letter, the one that spoke of a pact with the land, trembled in her hand. As she read the final lines aloud, the words echoed in the quiet night. The price will be paid, but not by you alone. The land demands what was promised, and the keeper must give what they hold most dear. Max, as if knowing what was about to happen, stepped forward and sat beside the circle of coins, his eyes locked with Emma's, almost as if he were waiting for something, waiting for her to make the final decision. The weight of the moment pressed down on her chest. She had uncovered the treasure, but in doing so, she had awakened something far darker, something that had been sleeping for generations. And now, the land was calling for its price. With a final, almost resigned sigh, Emma placed the letter at the center of the circle. Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled, softly at first, then with growing intensity. The trees seemed to sway in the windless night, and the earth began to shift as if something ancient was stirring beneath them. Max's fur bristled, his body tense with anticipation. For a brief moment, Emma saw the flicker of a shadow, an ethereal figure, standing just beyond the edge of the tree line. It was Samuel Griffin, or what remained of him, a specter bound to the land he had made a pact with. His face was obscured, but his presence was undeniable. He was watching, waiting. The rumbling stopped abruptly, and the air went deathly still. The land had been satisfied. The pact had been fulfilled. Emma's heart raced as she looked down at the gold coins, which now seemed to glow with an almost otherworldly light. The coins that had once seemed like a mere mystery were now the symbols of a much greater force, one that had chosen them as the keepers of its secret. The following days passed in a strange, unsettling quiet. Max returned to his usual self, though there was a distinct shift in his demeanor. He seemed calmer, almost as though the weight of his role had been lifted from him. Emma and Tom, however, felt the presence of something lingering just beyond their grasp, something they couldn't fully comprehend. They were forever bound to the land now, the mystery of the treasure and the pact lingering in their lives like an unseen shadow. Though they had paid the price, the knowledge they had gained was both a burden and a gift. They had uncovered a secret that had been buried for centuries, but in doing so, they had also freed the land from the curse that had plagued it for so long. The treasure, once thought to bring wealth, had only been a key to unlocking a deeper truth, and now that truth was theirs to carry. Now, as Emma and Tom settle back into their lives, they know the truth. Some mysteries are never truly solved. The land holds its secrets, and the price for uncovering them is more than most can bear. But for Emma and Tom, the story is not over. The land has been satisfied for now. If you enjoyed this tale of treasure, mystery, and the bond between humans and the land, don't forget to subscribe and keep watching. You never know what secrets we'll uncover next.